Welcome everyone to episode 121 of Raw Sport. My name is Ahmed El Houli, and today we've got a very big one for you guys. The man himself, Mr. Eddie Hearn. Welcome to Raw Sport. Welcome to the land down under.
Thank you, mate. Thanks for having me.
My utmost pleasure. Eddie, you've done something that's pretty rare in boxing. You promised the young man a deal when he jumped in for you and fought against George Kambosos on 5 days' notice, and you've come back and delivered the fight under Matchroom. We don't see this too often, Eddie, in the world of boxing.
Yeah, I'm probably a little bit softer than people think, but I like good people, and there's not a lot of good people in boxing, but definitely Steve Della and the guys down here at the Fortitude Gym and Jake Wiley, they're good people and they're honest people. And we had a situation with the Kambosos fight where Jordan got sick, and with 6 days to go, we were left without an opponent. And a very good young fighter from Australia jumped in on 6 days' notice, called Jake Wiley. And there's not a lot of people. I do shows all around the world. There's not a lot of people in that position that would have taken the fight. And Steve Della said to me, "Look, we'll do it, but if he does well, will you give him another chance?" And I said, "You got my word." And he did better than well. I mean, he really forced the fight, and it was a brilliant fight. He did great. So Steve came back, and it kind of coexisted with this 40-year anniversary of the boxing gym, which I'm in now, which is a great community gym. And then obviously with the Zone and a couple of other fighters as well, Sky Nicholson, Terrano originally was looking to be on the card as well. It just enabled us to keep our foot in the Australian market, which is very important for us now. This is our third show of the year here, probably four with Opatara against Quezzo recently, but that's with Tasman fighters. And I think it's a great market. I really do. Like, you've got so many great fighters here, and I think so much potential. So excited to be in Brisbane. It's going to be a wild fight, actually. Jake Wiley, Yusuf Dib is a really, really good domestic matchup, and looking forward to it.
Eddie, what does this mean for the Australian market? You've been here twice this year. We have a few champions. We got Jai Pataya, as you mentioned. Sky gets over as well tomorrow night. Jake gets over. We got a bit of a stable now. We've got Terra Moana as well.
Yeah,
are we going to see more
as well?
Justice Huni?
Yeah, I mean,
very unlucky.
I just think, like, for me, I think Jai is clearly the best pound for pound Australian fighter. I actually think he's a pound for pound fighter. Full stop. We've got to deliver the big fights. He's been very unlucky with the Gilberto Ramirez injury that's ruled him out of that big unification. Justice was a round and a bit away from a massive fight, like putting him in. But he's a young man; he can come again. Even fighters that we don't represent. Liam Pyrro we've worked with before. He's a great fighter. Tim Zhu, I know, didn't get the job done at elite level, but still a world class fighter. Nikita Zhu, really exciting. You just saw Sam Goodman last week give a great account of himself in Saudi Arabia. You got other female world champions. Shanika Johnson's an undisputed champion. Like, for me, we just got to keep growing the sport here. I think there's so much potential, but a lot of the time it's behind that paywall of pay-per-view. Like, if you look at Nikita Zhu the other night, who I think is a really exciting young talent, he's fighting on pay-per-view in a fight he can't lose a round in. And it's 70 Australian dollars. It's not the promoter's fault. It's just the broadcaster says that's the model that we think suits boxing best. We really need people to invest in boxing in Australia. You've got the talent to do it. And I think you've got the fan base is quite straightforward. You're just like us Brits, really. You love a good night out. You love good sport. You love a beer. It's not rocket science, And I just feel like I think boxing has a lot of upside in Australia.
Eddie, before I get into the business of the sport, Liam Pyrro was signed under Matchroom. He beat the boogeyman, but he had the rematch in Puerto Rico against Hitchens. Why didn't it happen back here in Australia?
Money.
Plain and simple.
Money. Simple. Because, Liam Pyrro made a lot of money for that fight. Richardson Hitchens is on good money. And that comes from the Zone on a US time zone. Without government funding for a big world championship fight, you can't really see those big purses in Australia. So, I felt like Richardson Hitchens is a very good fighter. I felt like Liam underperformed a little bit that night. He was amazing against Gabriel Matias. But yeah, honestly, just simple maths of from what Liam was making contractually to what Hitchens was getting to challenge. It was just impossible to do here. The purses in Australia are like 5 times smaller than the same fights in England
Yeah.
or in the US. And like again, that's not the promoters being, being tight. That's just the maths of the show. So like sometimes and when you fight in Australia, those guys they know that they take less money. Like the money Liam Pyrro's making now to fight is much less than he was making when he was fighting obviously Subriel Matias and those guys, but even Montana Love, like all those kind of fights. So but he's staying active, and that's important, and he's a very good fighter, and now he's moving up to 147.
Eddie, DAZN, which is the streaming organization that you brought to the world of boxing. Before you, we didn't know DAZN. That's the honest truth. Has acquired Foxtail. You spoke of Nikita Zoo. Nikita Zoo fought a main event and KO pay-per-view on Foxtail. Now, DAZN is the owner of Foxtail. Is that going to spruce up the scene a bit more here in Australia? Are we going to see that investment that is needed to get the sport to where it needs to be?
I hope so, is the answer to that. I mean, at the moment, they've probably got a lot more bigger things to them that they've been working on during this acquisition than just boxing, but they're now getting round to that. We actually did George Kambosos against Richardson Hitchens pay-per-view on Foxtel. And that was the first time we did that. The numbers were decent. They were solid. So, people keep asking me, are you gonna work with No Limit? I said, we work with everybody. I've worked with Angelo DiCarlo over here. I've worked with Tasman Fighters. I'm working with Steve Della and Fortitude. I have no problem working with, obviously in an ideal world, you want to do everything on your own, and obviously with my relationship with DAZN, I think there's good opportunities for us to do pay-per-views with them and Foxtel, but it has to come. It's more than that. It's very easy just to do a pay-per-view.
Yeah.
It's a lot more difficult to get a broadcaster to actually invest in a long-term plan to build profile of young fighters, to build them into pay-per-view stars. Because what's happening in Australia at the moment is people aren't getting built into pay-per-view stars. People are just being slung onto pay-per-view. And you can't build the numbers. Like, you need to be able to build those numbers from 10, 20, 40, 70. I mean, the last time anyone did numbers like that was Timzu, right? When he was on the rise and he was in those kind of fights. So, but how do you build Nikita Zoo into a star if you're doing 5,000 buys? Like, it's, you're really, you're cutting off the audience potential. And again, it's not the promoter's fault. It's just that's how the model works. We want to try and get those broadcasters to invest money in doing shows off pay-per-view so that we can build the audience. Then when you build that fighter, it's really what they did with Tim. They built Tim and then he started fighting on pay-per-view and the numbers were good. But with Nikita, like the other night, it's like that's the kind of fight that should just be free to air, really, or on a subscription service where a big subscriber base can watch that off pay-per-view. Then when he becomes a star or he's in the bigger fights, bang, then you go on pay-per-view and you don't do 5,000, you do 30,000 or 40,000. And that's, Tim was doing amazing numbers early on, and that's what really helped him get in that position.
Is that a bit similar to what you did with Sky Sports in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, different. Boxing was just much bigger. I mean, we built boxing again in the UK, but it was still like if you look at your running order of sports, and I probably won't get this right because I'm not Australian, but you got AFL, you got rugby union, you got cricket. I mean, you got, I don't know, swimming,
basketball,
soccer, basketball, all these things, and boxing's right down the fingers. Whereas in the UK, it's Premier League football, and then like boxing's right up there, and it's right up there in terms of digital conversation as well. So a lot of those media outlets like Sky Sports, like Talk Sport, like we were joking, IFL and Coogan Cassius, they're doing massive numbers because people are very passionate about conversing and debating boxing. People are talking shit online all the time. promoters are arguing, there's viral content, like it does really big numbers. So although we rebuilt boxing, you know, the customer base was already there. In Australia, it seems like they're not there, right? You've got a lot of people who love boxing, but not enough. And
Yeah.
so you've got to try and build the hardcore base, but also bring in the casuals. But you can't bring in the casuals because they don't know who these guys are. Like Jai Opataya, for me, should be an Australian sporting star, right? When
Yeah.
he beat Bradis with 2 broken jaws, you know, 2 breaks in his jaw, he should have become a hero overnight. But again, you're on pay-per-view, you're limiting your audience. You imagine if that fight was free to air, right, on Australia, with hundreds of thousands, millions watching, overnight becomes a superstar. Then you can put him on pay-per-view. Do you know what I mean?
It's
But it's getting the buy-in from the media partners.
we're a very small market, Eddie, as you know, and there's fragmentation and segmentation within that small market. So
Mm.
it doesn't help. It really doesn't. Anyway, we'll keep going. Let's talk about the sport. We're seeing a period in the sport where a lot of money's come in, and it's coming from sovereign wealth funds and so on and so on. We're seeing these mega cards that sometimes disappoint, sometimes live up to expectations. Now, the question is, does this create long-term growth for the sport, or are these just short-term spectacles?
I think that what we're seeing at the moment is great for boxing. Like in terms of the model, you know, we're talking about Saudi Arabia, we're talking about Riyadh season. You know, how is that plan going to progress? Let's strip it back and say right now what we're seeing is big nights, big fights, and we're seeing them consistently, which can only be good for the sport. And the trickle down effect, like for example, we're seeing at the moment that our shows around the world are performing a lot better at the gate and on broadcast because there's more interest in boxing right now than there has been for a long time. And
Yeah,
that's because we're seeing the big fights and we're seeing the sport, in my opinion, at its finest. So that can only be good for the sport. Now, what the long-term plan is to the structure, like I always feel like it's, you know, there's always talk about Dana White and TKO and stuff like that. Like you, in my opinion, I mean, money solves a lot of things, but boxing is so fragmented, like you say. Like it might be one of the few things you can't actually control because there's a lot of competitive people in boxing. There's a lot of ego in boxing. There's a lot of money in boxing, and these people just don't lay down.
hmm
You know, I mean, now I'm working with Frank Warren, but for nearly 20 years, we were like that every day, right? And it was like I had him finished and then he'd come back. You know, then
you
you
did.
think you got someone else finished and then they come back. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's never
Mm.
ending. And in the end, you just realize don't waste your energy on trying to do that. Just be consistent yourself and do what you do. And hopefully you're good enough to prevail. But you're never going to control the sport of boxing. Never. So, and that's what makes it what it is. Like the competitiveness of the people in boxing are the ones that are driving it.
Absolutely. Matchroom, a global brand now. We're seeing the new logo. We're seeing shows all around the world. Um, which market excites you now most moving forward in terms of growth? Of course, you do what you do in the UK and so on and so on. But where's that market where we're not giving away too many secrets, but you can see potential for most growth?
Yeah, I think everywhere is different, right? So UK, our biggest market, US, huge market for us. You know, we do 12 shows a year in both territories. That's 24 shows. 6 shows a year in Mexico. Mexico's a big kind of passion project of mine because it's the heritage and the love of the sport. You know, when I go to Mexico, not next week, but the week after, we're doing Sugar Nunes, who's a 130-pound world champion. He's unbelievable. We're going to his hometown in Los Mochis. There'll be 8,000 people there. They'll be hanging off the walls, right? And for me, that's my greatest feeling. You know, when you see the passion of people for boxing, that really excites me. Now, on the downside, there's never going to be the revenue in Mexico to keep the big fights there. You know, they're not going to spend $1,000 on a seat. You know, it's just that's the way it is. Obviously, Saudi Arabia involvement there. That's exciting. I like places where you're seeing the grassroots of boxing really explode, and that's where I think the potential will always be so high. I'm really, you know, sometimes we laugh in the boardroom because consistently we'll lose money in Australia. All right, every show that we've done, we've lost money, and it's like I'm not going to give up on it because I really believe it has potential. But everybody takes the piss out in the boardroom and goes, Eddie, do we have to go to Australia again? Like, how many times are you going to go before you realise that we're actually not making any money there? But it's a long-term play, you know. And luckily, we're a business that can afford a long-term play. You know, I still think there's huge growth. Germany is a very dormant market that used to have massive success in boxing, right? You're talking about a country that had RTL, you know, Sat1. These are huge national broadcasters where Klitschko used to fight, and they would do 6, 7, 8, 9 million audience for one fight. France is another market. All these places. But I'm so passionate about boxing. I believe that it's such a great sport that I believe it can work anywhere. And a lot of those countries that I talk about, they have history. They have an infrastructure of boxing. They have white collar boxing. They have corporate boxing. They have kids off the street going into boxing gyms. You know, you talk about these other sports at the moment. I was talking to some guys here earlier about rugby. Rugby in the UK is dead. Dead.
Yeah.
No kids are playing. Right. And that's when you know there's a problem. I say no kids are playing, but not in the same way. You know, I couldn't name you one member of the England rugby union team or the rugby league team. I'm a sports fan.
Yeah.
But I can name you the entire team from 20 years ago when they
Tony
were actually
Wilkinson.
national stars. And yeah, of course.
He
You know,
gave us
I was
heartbreak.
joking about, but even someone said about Australia, and I was going on about David Campese, and I think the person was too young to even remember who he was. But like that's the problem. And you know, I like being in markets that where boxing exists, but it has gone dormant because I really feel like you can reinvigorate it.
Wow. We've seen the rise of UFC's centralized model, and we're currently seeing that um, that well, I'll be very blunt here. We're currently seeing TKO coming into boxing, trying to amend the Muhammad Ali Act. So we have a similar centralized model in boxing. Does the sport need that?
I mean, I think that's alarming to fighters because the Muhammad Ali Act is designed to protect fighters. Okay, so all of a sudden, you know, that would raise some red flags for fighters. The UFC has a model, great business UFC. I mean, I like Dana White. I think they're an incredible company. The reality is from the revenue pie, you know, probably 20% of the revenue goes to fighter purses. Probably in boxing, it's 80%, right?
Yeah.
And just you look at what fighters are making versus UFC fighters, and UFC fighters may have bigger commercial value, but the money in boxing is actually out of control.
Eddie,
So I don't.
Eddie, sorry, can I just stop you there for 1 second? It's just cutting in and out. Can you lift your phone? Maybe it's the voice. Sorry about that,
Oh,
mate.
there you go. I thought that was you, but
No,
yeah.
no, it was
So
you there.
you know, I think that you know the revenue stream, the way that they distribute the purses, I think they're going to struggle to come into boxing and accept the purses that fighters are expecting. And you know, because the problem with the Muhammad Ali Act for them is the fighters get to see the revenue of the show in the Muhammad Ali
Yep.
Act.
Yep.
So you know, all of a sudden, if they're not making the money, you know, they will be able to see the revenue that the show's creating. And you know, I think many will feel that that's not acceptable under the UFC model.
Absolutely. All right, Eddie, we're restricted for time. I want to thank you very much before
No problem.
we let you go.
Enjoyed the
last
chat.
one.
Good questions as well.
We'll talk more.
Nice chat for some kind of questions. Well done.
Thank you very much, Eddie. Thank you all to those who tuned in. Take care, everyone. See you, mate.
Cheers.